Get on the ground. No. The shout came from behind, sharp and sudden. Before Daniel Harris could turn around, hands slammed into his shoulders and forced him face down onto the sidewalk. His cheek scraped concrete. A knee pressed into his back. Wait, what did I do? Daniel yelled, panic rising fast. Metal cuffs snapped around his wrists. Too tight. Someone yanked his arms higher, pain shooting through his shoulders. A small crowd stopped. Phones came out. Cars slowed. Don't move, an officer said. You match the description. Description of who? Daniel asked, breathless. I'm just coming from work. No one answered. Another officer pulled Daniel's wallet from his pocket and flipped it open. Daniel Harris, he read out loud. Lives 3 blocks from here. Daniel stared at the pavement, heart pounding. He'd lived on this street for 6 years. He knew every crack in the sidewalk. He had never been arrested. Never even handcuffed. You're confusing me with someone else, he said, trying to stay calm. I haven't done anything. A woman in the crowd whispered, That's him. I think that's him. That was all it took. They lifted Daniel roughly and pushed him against a patrol car. The hood was hot. His wrists burned. An officer leaned close to his ear. We're looking for a man who assaulted someone 2 blocks away. I wasn't there, Daniel said. Check the time. Check anything. They didn't. As one officer searched him, something fell from Daniel's jacket pocket onto the ground. A folded paper. The officer kicked it aside without looking. Daniel saw it land. And his stomach dropped. Because that paper proved exactly where he had been. If you're still here with Daniel in this moment, thank you for listening, because what they ignore next changes everything. The radio crackled. Unit 3, a voice said. Victim is en route to identify the suspect. Daniel's breath caught. They were bringing someone to point at him. Stand him up. The command came fast. Daniel was pulled upright, his arms still twisted behind him. The street felt suddenly smaller. The crowd closer. He could hear his own breathing, sharp and uneven. A patrol car rolled up and stopped hard. The back door opened, and an older woman stepped out with help from an officer. Her face was pale. Her arm was wrapped in a loose bandage. Daniel's heart slammed. That's the victim, someone whispered. The officers positioned Daniel under a streetlight, even though the sun was still high. One of them gripped his arm and turned him slightly, like an object on display. Take a good look, the officer said to the woman. Is this the man? Daniel swallowed. Ma'am, he said, voice shaking despite his effort, I'm sorry you were hurt, but it wasn't me. I wasn't even here. The woman stared at him. Her eyes moved slowly, his face, his hands, his clothes. The crowd went quiet. I don't know, she said. He looks like him. But I was scared. Everything happened fast. That's enough, an officer said. Clothing matches. Height matches. But her attacker had a beard, someone else said. Daniel didn't. He hadn't in years. The officers hesitated. Just a second. Then one of them spoke into his radio. We're transporting him for further questioning. Daniel's chest tightened. You're arresting me? Detaining, the officer corrected flatly. The cuffs were checked again. Tighter this time. Daniel was guided toward the back of the car. As they passed, his eyes locked on the folded paper still lying near the curb. Please, he said, nodding toward it. That fell out of my pocket. You need to look at that. An officer glanced down, unimpressed. Later. The car door opened. Just then, another voice cut through the tension. Hold on. A younger officer stepped forward, looking uneasy. Dispatch just updated the description. Everyone froze. Suspect has a visible neck tattoo, the voice continued over the radio. Large. Letters. Daniel's pulse jumped. I don't have any tattoos, he said quietly. The officers looked at each other. And for the first time since he'd been shoved to the ground, doubt crept into their faces. Turn your head, an officer said. Daniel did. Left. Then right. Bare skin. No ink. No letters. The pause that followed felt heavier than the cuffs. The older woman squinted, stepping closer. "The man who attacked me," she said slowly, "had something on his neck. I remember that now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. One officer exhaled sharply. Another rubbed his forehead. The grip on Daniel's arm loosened, just a little. "So you're saying it might not be him?" the younger officer asked the woman. She hesitated. "I'm saying, I'm not sure. That should have been enough." "It wasn't. People change," a senior officer said. "Tattoos can be covered. Removed." Daniel felt anger surge. "You think I had a tattoo removed in the last 20 minutes?" No one answered him. They walked him to the patrol car anyway. Not shoving now. Still firm. Still decided. Inside the back seat, the door slammed shut. The sound echoed in Daniel's chest. Through the window, he saw the folded paper still sitting by the curb, fluttering slightly in the breeze. He leaned forward as far as the cuffs allowed. "That paper is my time card," he called out. "It shows I clocked out across town 10 minutes before this happened." The officers exchanged looks. "Then why didn't you say that earlier?" one asked. "I did," Daniel said. "You didn't listen." The engine started. As the car pulled away, Daniel watched the sidewalk disappear, the paper with it. His proof. Left behind. At the station, he was led into a bright holding room. The cuffs finally came off. His wrists throbbed. A detective entered with a file and stopped short when he saw Daniel's face. "Ha!" he muttered. "That's strange." Daniel's heart jumped. "What?" The detective flipped the file open, then looked back up. "The man we're actually looking for has the same name as you." Daniel stared at him. "Same name. And if that sounds like coincidence, stay with this, because that detail changes everything in ways no one expects." "Same name," Daniel repeated. "That's it." The detective didn't answer right away. He flipped a few pages, his expression tightening. "Daniel Harris," he said again, slower this time. "Age 34. Lives on Pine Street." "That's me," Daniel said. "You already know that." "Yes," the detective replied. "But it's also him." Daniel felt the room tilt slightly. "You're telling me you dragged me off the street because someone else has my name?" The detective finally looked up. "Not just the name. Similar height. Same build. Same neighborhood." Witness description was vague. Daniel let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Vague is putting it lightly." The detective ignored the comment and continued reading. "The other Daniel Harris has prior arrests. Assault. Disorderly conduct. He's been on probation." Daniel leaned forward. "And I haven't. Not once. You ran my record." "We did," the detective said. "After." That word stung more than the cuffs. The door opened and an officer stepped in, holding a clear plastic bag. Inside was Daniel's wallet. "We found this on him," the officer said. "Yes," Daniel snapped. "Because you took it off me." The officer hesitated. "There was also a paper on the sidewalk." "We didn't retrieve it." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. "That paper proves where I was." "You left it there." The detective shifted uncomfortably. "Dispatch is pulling footage from nearby businesses," he said. "If it checks out, you'll be released." Released. No apology. No acknowledgement of the pain in his wrists or the humiliation of being displayed on the street. Minutes passed. Then more. Finally, the detective's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then frowned. "That's odd." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What now?" "The real suspect," the detective said slowly, "was just picked up 2 blocks from where you were stopped." Daniel exhaled, relief rushing in. But it vanished when the detective added, "And he says you were involved." The room went quiet. Because even with the truth right there, Daniel realized they still weren't done with him. "He says I was involved," Daniel repeated, disbelief cutting through his exhaustion. "That doesn't even make sense." The detective held up a hand. "Relax. Suspects say a lot of things." But his tone had changed. Less certain. more cautious. Daniel sat back in the hard chair, staring at the blank wall. His wrists still ached. His throat felt raw from repeating the same truth over and over. Outside this room, his life was paused, his phone unanswered, his job wondering where he was, his name now tied to something he didn't do. The door opened again. Another detective entered, older, carrying a tablet. "We pulled footage from the bus terminal," she said. "Time-stamped." Daniel leaned forward. "That's where I was. I took the 5:40 bus home." She nodded and turned the screen so he could see. Grainy video. A crowd waiting. Then, there he was. Same jacket. Same backpack. Clear as day. The timestamp blinked in the corner. The first detective exhaled slowly. "That puts you across town when the assault happened." "So I'm done here?" Daniel asked. "Looks that way," the detective said. "We'll process your release." No apology. Just procedure. As they stood, the older detective frowned at the tablet. "Wait," she said. "Zoom in." She tapped the screen. The image sharpened on Daniel's backpack. "There," she said. Pause. On the screen, a small reflective patch on the strap caught the light. The same patch Daniel had sewn on himself years ago. Distinct. Unmistakable. "That's important," Daniel said quietly. "The other Daniel Harris doesn't have that." The detectives exchanged looks. Because the suspect they'd just arrested? He was wearing an identical jacket. And suddenly, Daniel understood. They hadn't just confused him for someone else. They'd been confusing two lives, and using one to protect the other. "Bring him back in." The order was sharp, sudden. Daniel had already stood up, already believed this was over, when the detective's voice cut through the room. His chest tightened again as if someone had pulled a cord inside him. "I thought you said I was being released," Daniel said. "We did," the detective replied. "But now we need clarification." Clarification. Daniel sat back down slowly. The door stayed open this time, but it didn't feel like freedom. The tablet was placed on the table between them, the paused image still glowing. His backpack. The reflective patch. "The suspect claims you lent him the jacket," the detective said. "Says you were together earlier." Daniel laughed once, sharp and hollow. "So now he's rewriting my life." The older detective studied the screen again. "The patch isn't standard. You added it yourself." "Yes," Daniel said. "Years ago. After I almost got hit crossing the street." That answer landed heavier than expected. Because it meant something simple. Personal. Verifiable. The room quieted. The tension softened, just slightly. Daniel felt the edge of panic dull, replaced by a tired sadness. Hours of fear, all because two men shared a name. The detective stood. "We're going to compare his jacket." Minutes passed. Then footsteps. Voices in the hall. The detective returned, face unreadable. "The suspect's jacket doesn't have the patch." "He lied." Daniel exhaled, shoulders dropping. "So I'm free," he said. "Yes," the detective replied. "You can go." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Daniel stood, legs stiff. As he reached for his things, the detective added casually, "We'll note in the file that you were released." Daniel paused. Released, or wrongly detained? The detective didn't answer. And if you're wondering what that quiet choice of words leads to, keep listening. Because what happens next is the part no one expects. The automatic doors slid open, and Daniel stepped outside into the afternoon sun. For a moment, everything felt unreal. Cars passed. People laughed. Someone talked loudly on a phone. The world hadn't paused while he'd been pressed into concrete, mistaken for someone else, and quietly erased from his own evening. He stood there, breathing, waiting for the rush of relief. It didn't come. Instead, a reporter approached him, microphone already raised. "Sir," she said, "can you confirm you were detained in connection with the Pine Street assault?" Daniel froze. "I know," he said. "I was released." "But your name was broadcast on police radio," she replied, "and scanned on social media. People think you're the suspect who got away." Daniel's stomach dropped. Across the street, he saw it, his own face on someone's phone screen. A blurry photo taken while he was handcuffed. His name typed underneath it. Daniel Harris. Assault suspect. He turned back toward the station, heart racing. "You need to fix this," he said to the officer at the door. "You told people I was the suspect." The officer shifted uncomfortably. "We released you. That's all we can do." "That's not enough," Daniel said. "You confused me for someone else." The officer shrugged. "Mistakes happen." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You never apologized. You never corrected it." Inside the building, he could hear phones ringing. Someone laughing. Life continuing. Daniel walked away slowly, every step heavier than the last. His phone buzzed. His manager. "Daniel," the voicemail said, uncertain, "we saw something online. Call me." His hands trembled. Because they had let him go. But they had left everything else behind. And if you think the damage stops when the cuffs come off, stay with this. Because the real cost was just beginning to show. Daniel sat alone on the edge of his bed, the room quiet except for the soft buzz of his phone lighting up again and again. Messages. Missed calls. Screenshots. His name. His face. Still there. He had gone home, showered, scrubbed at the faint scrape on his cheek until it burned, but none of it washed away what followed him out of that station. Online posts didn't say released. They didn't say mistaken identity. They said detained in assault investigation. That was enough. He called the station once. Then again. Finally, a clerk answered. Daniel asked for a correction. Something official. A statement. "We don't issue those unless charges are filed," the clerk said. "But you confused me for someone else," Daniel replied. "You never apologized. You never cleared my name." There was a pause. Then, flat and tired, "Sir, you're not under arrest. That's all I can tell you." The line went dead. Later that night, his manager texted, "HR wants to talk tomorrow." Daniel stared at the message for a long time. He thought about the folded paper they'd kicked aside. The time card that proved his innocence. The reflective patch on his backpack, the one small detail that finally forced them to admit the truth, quietly, behind closed doors. That detail had saved him from a cell. It hadn't saved him from the stain. No officer knocked on his door. No call came. No apology followed. The system moved on the moment it no longer needed him. Daniel lay back, staring at the ceiling, knowing one thing with painful clarity. They confused him for someone else. They let him go. And they never said they were sorry. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and share it, because some injustices don't end loudly. They end quietly, and live on anyway.